I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does, without me lifting a finger. So I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
Today on CityCast DC. So, we know that the federal government fired thousands of workers in DC earlier this year. Now, some court rulings suggest that they're being rehired, but not fully. It's an absolute mess. Emily Peck from Axios tells us what's going down between the Trump administration and the federal workers that DOGE tried to purge. Today is Thursday, March 20th. I'm senior producer Julia Karen, and here's what DC is talking about. Hey, Emily, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Yeah, so last week, there were 2 federal judges. There was one in California and one in Maryland, and they both said that federal agencies have to hire back thousands of probationary employees that they had abruptly fired. How many people are we talking here that were fired?
I think right now we can safely say almost 25,000. In one of the cases, 18 agencies filed separate declarations telling the court how many probationary workers they had filed. And if you do the math, it comes out to slightly less than 25,000. That said, there's one department that didn't file their document yet, so it's probably a little bit higher than that. The people have been saying 30,000.
Even if we're in that range of 25,000 to 30,000 people, that's so many people. And how does this work? How do agencies hire back thousands of people at once? I'm sure it's an HR nightmare.
Girl. I mean, I think we're just at the beginning of understanding it, right? There's so many problems. So a lot of agencies have technically rehired people, but putting them immediately on administrative leave. So you're getting paid, you're going to get back pay, but you're still at home or wherever you are. You're not going back to work. Other agencies are starting the so-called everyone who has a job or office job, we know the term, the dreaded onboarding. So the other agencies are starting their onboarding processes. And in the government, that takes longer and is probably more costly and time-consuming than in the private sector, is my new understanding. And the agencies themselves acknowledge this in their filings. In these court filings, they say, like, this is going to be hard and expensive and it's going to take time. And not only that, the catch is that these cases that you mentioned are still on appeal. The Trump administration is still fighting this. So, and the agencies say, like, this could all reverse itself as well.
So you talk to federal employees about this. How do they feel about it? I know my friends that I have talked to are feeling some sort of way about all of this. Like, I feel cautiously optimistic is even too optimistic for this.
I mean, yes, of course. I mean, you could imagine what it feels like to be fired and then to not know what's going to happen and then told you're being rehired, but also told these cases aren't over, so you might still be fired. And even if the cases work out in your favor, your department's still doing a reduction in force and you might lose your job anyway. I think someone I spoke to today said the only certainty is uncertainty. She said her and her husband are no longer planning to have a baby. They're no longer planning the remodel on their house. They didn't re-enroll their kid in preschool. Like, people are not only feeling anxious and uncertain, they're operating in such a way that is anxious and uncertain. And that's like bad not only for them, but like for the overall economy in DC or wherever. The overall economy nationwide, really, because workers are not just in D.C., but all over the country.
As you said, President Trump has appealed all of this. What is going to happen to those workers while things are sort of in this legal limbo? Do they get hired, then refired, then rehired? Like, what happens here?
I don't know. I mean, no one knows. So anyone who tells you they know, they don't actually know. Some people probably are rehired for good. Some people probably are not. I was just talking to someone who is at an agency, I think NOAA was the agency. In the letter they sent her, reinstating her, the letter says, if we prevail, or the Commerce Department in this case, prevails, and the temporary restraining order is invalidated, meaning the order to reinstate her job is invalidated, then your original termination would be effective as of the original termination date, and the government may waive indebtedness.
So she would be brought on for admin leave, but then fired. And would she have to owe money back from that admin leave?
It's completely unclear from the letter. And she said she had heard different things from different lawyers. And it's very ambiguous. It's not really clear what that means. Other agencies they don't say anything about this in their reinstatement letters. And I didn't really see that in the court filings. Most of the agencies sort of have this almost boilerplate language where they all say employees could be subjected to multiple changes in their employment status in a matter of weeks. They basically are acknowledging on appeal, the district court's ruling could be reversed. They could be returned to full duty status or not. Another one says reinstated individuals will be forced to untangle the maze of their potential appeals rights, because some of these workers are covered not only in these two rulings, but some of them have cases before the Merit Systems Protection Board, which is like this quasi-judicial federal court where typically federal employees go to protest firings, whatever, unfair treatment, stuff like that. So a lot of workers have cases there too.
What happens for the Trump administration if they don't comply and don't give people their jobs back? Is that even allowed?
I mean, we're talking about the Trump administration. As we're talking now on Tuesday, the other big story, right, is that the Trump administration kind of didn't follow a court order to return these deported people back to the United States. And the conversation is like, they defied a court order. What happens now? And I don't know. The judge can put sanctions. There's fines, imprisonment.
What exactly did these judges say with regard to these rulings and why they were deemed illegal?
The TLDR is there's a way to do a RIF, reductions in force, which up until a month ago, I had never heard this term before. And this isn't the way you do it. Not only that, the government basically perpetuated a sham where they told people they were being fired for cause, right? Because that's how you are supposed to fire probationary workers. If they don't fulfill their duties, you can fire them more easily than you could someone who's not probationary. Yeah, so they said the federal government perpetuated effectively a sham. They told people they were being fired for performance when what they were really doing was a RIF in disguise. And that is unlawful.
So while our heads are swimming around in all of this, I know one of the things that the states have argued is that this could have turned out differently if the Trump administration had basically given employees a 60-day notice. Could the Trump administration just redo this now and just say, hey, actually, we're giving this time notice?
Yeah, they can absolutely do that. And the administration is working on RIFs across most federal agencies now. And these official reductions in force will allow the administration to take that more measured approach in firing people and giving the appropriate notice following the appropriate procedures.
After the Fact, a podcast by Pew, keeps it real with data-driven insights on today's big issues. No spin, just facts, mixed with stories from experts, policymakers, and people making a difference. Whether you're into the research or the personal stories behind it, we've got you covered. So what are you waiting for? Listen to After the Fact wherever you get your podcasts. Now selling. The Sydney brings 48 boutique condominiums to DC's Union Market District, where modern living meets unbeatable convenience. Tour our 2 new model homes and experience these stunning residences. Choose from 1 bedrooms starting in the low 300s, 1 bedroom plus dens from the low 400s, and 2 bedrooms from the low 500s, plus secure garage parking. Situated on Florida Avenue Northeast, the Sydney offers prime access to H Street's dining, nightlife, and Union Market's artisanal shops, all with easy metro access. Visit thesydneydc.com to schedule your tour today.
This episode is sponsored by Babbel. Are you holding back on foreign travel plans this year because you're afraid of the language gap? I'm not, because I have Babbel. I'm David Plotz, the CEO of CityCast, and I'm learning Spanish on Babbel, getting ready for a trip to Mexico City. Babbel is the language learning app that gets you talking. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons, handcrafted by over 200 language experts, get you to begin speaking your new language in 3 weeks or at whatever pace you choose. Babbel's tips and tools are inspired by the real-life stuff you actually need when communicating. With a focus on conversation, you'll be ready to talk wherever you go. Babbel has given me great lessons on getting directions, ordering in a restaurant, and making plans. And of all the things I'm doing in Mexico City, I'm probably most excited about the soccer game we're going to. So I was excited to learn how to cheer from Babbel. That'll be me you'll hear yelling, "Fuerza Tigres! Fuerza Tigres!" With over 16 million subscriptions sold, Babbel's 14 award-winning language courses are backed by a 20-day money-back guarantee. Let's get more of you talking in a new language. Babbel is gifting our listeners 60% off subscriptions at babbel.com/citycast. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/citycast. Spelled BABBEL.com/citycast. Babbel.com/citycast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
So amid all this, with all the appeals, do we go to the Supreme Court? People are looking to get hired, refired, rehired again. Do you think that this could lead to long-term changes in how federal employees get hired and fired?
I don't think it'll necessarily lead to changes in how the hiring process works for federal employees, but I think it will obviously lead to changes in sort of job seekers, just considerations when they're going to work for the federal government. Like, I've spoken to people who, you know, they thought they were working, they got a federal government job. They thought they were going to be there for life. Like, attrition in the federal government is, I think someone told me today, like a third of what it is in the private sector. Like, layoffs are rare. People don't just quit. Like, it's very stable. So I think in the hiring process, the big difference would just be in the mentality of people taking the jobs and the quality of people taking the jobs. You know, a lot of people traded status. They traded, you know, if you're like a tech worker, you could go work for Google, or you could work for the US Digital Service, and you're sort of trading public service and stability for maybe more pay or whatever. So that's the hiring process. The firing process, yeah, I mean, the Trump administration is trying to make it real easy to fire these people. That is apparently the goal. And that's been a goal for a lot of people for a long time, who argue that it's too hard to fire public employees, that they should be at will, like how me and you are at, well, I don't know, maybe you're in a union, I don't know, but we're at will. Like, my boss could call me up and be like, sorry, bye. And I would have little recourse, right, outside of like discrimination laws and things. But it's not like that in the federal workforce, or it used to not be like that in the federal workforce. But the Trump administration is pushing all the boundaries of all the protections that these workers really have. It's not really clear. Like, I spoke to someone last week who he's been like fighting to make it easier to fire federal workers for his whole career. And he was like, you know, some of the stuff the White House is doing could long-term make it easier to fire people. Like, they're trying to reclassify certain federal workers to make it easier to fire them. But some of this short-term stuff they're doing now with the probationary workers, like, it seems like it's backfiring. And it's not clear to me that long-term it's going to make a difference. Like, if the next president does come into the White House, if we do get a new president, will they be able to quickly fire people like this, or there'll be more protections in place, or everything will reassert itself? I don't know. But it looks like this White House is doing the best it can to sort of break all the guardrails.
So what other methods did that person tell you for like making it easier to fire government workers, where it's notoriously hard to fire people? I'm
going to like botch this because it's not the nerdiest explanation, but there are many classes of federal workers. But let's say there are two big classes. One are political appointees, and a president is welcome to come into office and fire as many of those people, with some limitations that are being argued over now, as he wants. And then there are workers who are civil service bureaucrats, and they have all these protections that we're like kind of talking about. So Schedule F would mean more workers would be in the political appointee category. They're trying to reclassify some of those civil servants as more policy. They're trying to argue that some of these civil servants have a lot more policy-making influence and therefore should be considered political, and you should be able to just get rid of them.
So if I'm a listener of this podcast and I'm a federal worker and my job has been in flux for the last month and a half or so, let's say, What should I be looking for in the coming weeks as this legal battle continues up through the courts?
I don't know what's going to happen or even what to look for at this point. I mean, you want to, I guess, keep your eye on these cases. I feel like that's just a really stressful place to be in. Personally, I'm a person who's been laid off twice from jobs. And the idea of like being laid off and put back to work, I know I would lose my mind. Like that is, at least when you get laid off, typically you're done. You go and you move on, and like every day is like a step towards like figuring out a new way to live and finding a new job and all that stuff. So anyways, all to say, like, I don't know what you should be looking for if you're one of these workers. Probably a new job, to be honest. You know, if you're in a union, you know, be in touch with your union representatives. They're really, these guys, there are so many different public sector unions. They're really on top of this. They're the plaintiffs in these cases. Call me, tell me how you feel, whatever.
Reach out to Emily and reach out to CityCast so we can get an exclusive.
There you go.
Awesome. Well, Emily, thank you so much for joining us today and breaking this all down.
Thanks for having me.
That's all for today here on CityCast DC. Send this episode to a friend who's refreshing the court feeds just like we are. We'll have updates as they come. Check back tomorrow morning for more news from around the city. Bye.